The universe does not trade with justice. Pain is not a punishment reserved for the wicked. It is simply a condition of being alive. And sometimes it falls upon the best of us, not because we deserve it, but simply because it's their turn. There was a young man, a man who lived in the fullness of his youth, not in years, but in vigor and success. His name was Job, and he was the exception to all the rules of chaos. He was a man who had deciphered the system. He lived in the land of Uz, and the text that records his life does not call him rich or powerful at the beginning. It calls him perfect and upright, a man who feared God and actively turned away from evil. His life was a work of art. He was the greatest man in all the East. His wealth was not measured in gold, but in life. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys. He had a structure, a house, a family. And what a family! 7 sons and 3 daughters. His life was a perfect circle of blessings. His children held banquets in their houses, each on their day inviting their sisters. And Job, the perfect father, watched this circle of happiness, and his piety was so meticulous that when the days of the banquet ended, he would get up in the morning and offer sacrifices for each of them. Perhaps, he thought, my children have sinned and blasphemed against God in their hearts. He was the man who did everything well. He covered all angles. He left nothing to chance. He was the living proof that if you honor God, God will honor you. He was the system made flesh. But perfection on earth causes a kind of unwanted attention elsewhere. There is a world behind ours, a control room of reality where causes and consequences are debated. One day, the sons of God, the angelic beings, came to present themselves before their Creator. And among them, like a shadow clinging to the light, came also the accuser. God's voice resonated, and the conversation focused on the only anomaly on earth. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him in the world, a perfect man, upright, God-fearing, and shunning evil. It was a divine boast. God was proud of his creation. But the voice of the accuser is the voice of cynicism. It is the voice that always seeks the price. He replied, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him, his house, and all that he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and see if he does not blaspheme you to your face." It was a challenge, a cosmic wager. The accuser was saying that Job's piety was not love. It was a business. It was a contract. You protect me. I worship you. Remove the protection, and love will turn into hatred. And God, to test the authenticity of Job's faith, accepted the wager. "Behold," he said, "all that he has is in your hand. Only do not put your hand on him." The accuser left, and the protection, the invisible enclosure surrounding Job's perfect life, disappeared. The young man who had everything was now naked before chaos, and he did not know it. The fall was not a trickle. It was a flood. It happened in a single day. It was not a bad week. It was the collapse of a universe in a few hours. Job was at his house. A messenger arrived running, with the dust of the desert on his clothes and panic in his eyes. "Sir, the oxen were plowing, and the donkeys grazing, and the Sabaeans attacked and took them away, and they killed the servants with the sword. I only escaped to bring you the news." The young man could not even process the ruin of his agriculture when, even as he was speaking, another arrived. God's fire fell from the sky. The messenger raised a trembling arm toward the sky. It burned the sheep and the shepherds and consumed them. I only escaped to bring you the news. Fire of God. Job heard these words. In his mind, this was not an accident. It was an act of God. But before he could understand it, even this one was speaking, and a third arrived. The Chaldeans. They made 3 squads and attacked the camels and took them away. And they killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I only escaped to bring you the news. In 3 blows, his wealth, the work of his life, had been wiped out. He was a ruined man. But he still had what mattered. He still had his children. And even this one was speaking. When the 4th messenger arrived, he could barely stand. His clothes were torn. His face was a mask of horror. Your sons and your daughters, he gasped, were eating and drinking wine in the house of their eldest brother. And behold, a great wind came from the desert side and struck the 4 corners of the house. And the house fell upon the young people, and they are dead. I only escaped to bring you the news. 10 children, 10 lives, in an instant. The perfect circle, broken forever. The wind, the desert, the house, all dead. Job's response to this was a testimony of his greatness. The accuser watched from a distance, waiting for the curse, but it did not come. Job stood up, tore his robe, a sign of unbearable pain, shaved his head, a sign of total humiliation, and then he did the unthinkable. He fell to the ground and worshipped, and he said the words that made the accuser tremble. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The text is clear. In all this, Job did not sin, nor did he charge God with wrong. The accuser had lost the first round. The man was pure. But the test was not over. The siege remained open. There was another gathering in heaven, and God's voice echoed again. Have you considered my servant Job? He still retains his integrity, even when you incited me against him to ruin him without cause. The accuser did not give up. Cynicism is persistent. Skin for skin, he replied. All that a man has, he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and see if he will not blaspheme you to your face. The wager was doubled. The suffering would shift from external to internal. Behold, said God, he is in your hand. Only spare his life. And the accuser descended again. This time, he did not use scabs or desert winds. He attacked the man himself. He struck Job with a malignant boil. It is not a noble disease. It is not a war wound. It is a plague of suppurating sores, an unbearable itch that covered his body, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. The greatest man of the East, the upright and perfect young man, was now sitting on a pile of ashes, a trash heap on the outskirts of the city. His only company was pain. His only relief was a piece of broken tile he used to scratch his bleeding scabs. It was total degradation. He had become a pariah, a spectacle of horror. His friends had not yet arrived. His only human company was his wife. She saw him, a specter covered in pus, scratching himself in the trash, and her faith broke. Look at you, she said, her voice broken by pain and disgust. Do you still hold on to your integrity? Curse God and die. It was a temptation. It was an escape. Finish with this, blame God, and surrender. But Job, even in this, remained firm. He looked at her and said, How does any foolish woman speak? You have spoken. What? Shall we receive good from God and not evil? In all this, the text says, Job did not sin with his lips. The accuser had failed again. Then his friends arrived. 3 men, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They heard of his tragedy and came to comfort him. But when they arrived and saw him, they did not recognize him. This was not the Job they knew. This was a monster. And they wept and tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. And then they did the only useful thing they could do. They sat with him on the ashes, in silence, for 7 days and 7 nights, because they saw that his pain was very great. 7 days of silence, 7 days of sharp pain, of itching, of the sight of the empty house, of the echo of the voices of his 10 children. 7 days of feeling God's abandonment. And on the seventh day, Job, the perfect man, the man who had not sinned with his lips, finally broke down. And this is where the true curse began. Job opened his mouth, and he did not curse God, not yet. He did something worse. He cursed his own life. He cursed God's purpose in creating him. "May the day I was born perish," he whispered, his voice harsh from illness. "And the night it was said, 'A man is conceived.' Why did I not die in the womb, or expire upon leaving the belly?" His monologue was a torrent of anguish. Why is light given to one in misery, and life to those with a bitter spirit? It was a cry of injustice. He was cursing creation, and in doing so, he was cursing the Creator. It was the beginning of his rebellion. He was the young man cursing God, not with an insult, but with a question that had no answer. Why? And his friends, who had remained silent, now made their great mistake. They believed they had the answer, and their answers, one by one, began to build a prison of theology around Job's soul. Eliphaz, the mystic, was the first. He spoke gently, with the voice of experience. "Think now," he said. "What innocent has been lost, and where have the righteous been destroyed? I have seen that those who plow iniquity and sow injury, that is what they reap." It was the oldest argument, cause and effect. If you are suffering, it is because you have sinned. Confess your secret sin, Job, and everything will return to normal. But Job knew something that Eliphaz did not. Job knew he was innocent. He knew that this simple equation was a lie, and Eliphaz's comfort felt like salt in his wounds. "Look at me," Job replied. "Tell me what I have erred in. Are my words false?" Then Bildad, the traditionalist, spoke. He was a man who believed in rules. "If your children sinned against him," he said coldly, "he cast them into the place of their rebellion. If you seek God in the morning, if you are pure and upright, he will awaken for you now." Bildad's argument was even crueler. "Your children," he said, "probably deserved it, and you are not as pure as you think. The system works, Job. You are the one who is broken." Job's anguish turned into anger. "You are all great comforters," he shouted. "How long will you torment me with words? It is not my fault. He has stripped my glory. He has torn down my walls. He has made me his target. His archers have surrounded me." Job no longer saw a just God. He saw a divine hunter who had chosen him as prey for no reason. Finally, Zophar, the dogmatic one, the man who was absolutely sure he was right. "Oh, that God would speak," he mocked, "and reveal to you the secrets of wisdom. You would know that God has punished you less than your iniquity deserves." This was the lowest blow. Not only are you guilty, Job, but you are so vile that this unimaginable horror is, in fact, an act of mercy. You deserve worse. And so, the circle of torment continued. The friends argued with cold, orderly theology, and Job responded with the raw, bloody reality of his pain. They defended a system. He defended his innocence. And the more they defended their pocket-sized God, the more Job became convinced that the true God was a sadistic monster, a cosmic tyrant. The young man had lost everything: his wealth, his children, his health, and now his friends were taking away the only thing he had left: his integrity. They were forcing him to admit a lie so that his theological system could keep functioning. And Job refused. In his desperation, his anger surpassed his pain. He stopped talking to his friends. He no longer cared about them. And he lifted his scarred face, not toward the pile of ashes, but toward the empty sky. And he began to speak directly to God. Not with worship, not with pleading, with a legal citation. "Who would give me the knowledge to find God?" he shouted to the storm brewing on the horizon. "I would go to his throne. I would present my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I want to contend with God." Job, the upright young man, was accusing his creator. He was demanding his day in court. He was convinced that if he could just present his case, the injustice would be so obvious that God himself would have to acquit him. He was cursing God by accusing him of being an unjust judge. And then God responded. It was not a gentle voice. It was not a legal argument. The response came from the heart of the storm. And the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. It was a voice that sounded like the crashing ocean, like mountains being born. And it did not answer Job's question. It did not answer the why. It never mentioned the accuser. It never explained the wager. Instead, God's voice put Job in his place with a barrage of questions that shattered the young man's mind. Who is this that darkens counsel with words without knowledge? Now gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. It was God accepting the challenge, but turning the court around. You are the accused, Job, and I am the prosecutor. And the questions began, a cascade of cosmic power. Where were you when I founded the earth? Let me know, if you have intelligence. Who ordered its measurements? Or who stretched the cord over it? On what are its bases founded? Or who laid its cornerstone, when all the stars of the dawn praised it, and all the children of God rejoiced? God was saying, you were not there, Job. You do not understand the foundations of your own house. How dare you judge the architect? The voice continued, relentless. Have you commanded the morning in your days? Have you shown the dawn its place? Have you entered the treasuries of snow? Or have you seen the treasuries of hail? Where is light distributed, and where does the wind spread over the earth? Job was being crushed, not by anger, but by scale. He was being drowned by the vastness of creation. God moved from cosmology to zoology, like a divine biologist mocking Job's ignorance. Do you know the time when wild goats give birth? Can you count the months of their pregnancy? Did you distribute the prey for the lion? He showed the crow, the wild donkey, the peacock, the warhorse. The horse laughs at fear and is not startled. Did you give the horse its strength? Did you clothe its neck with manes? God was demonstrating, point by point, that Job had no control over anything, that the universe was a wild, beautiful, and indifferent symphony that he could barely perceive, much less direct. And finally, God led Job to the monsters, to the creatures of chaos that Job didn't even know existed. Behold now Behemoth, said God, describing a colossal creature that ate grass like an ox, but whose strength was in its loins. And then the final blow, Leviathan, the great sea dragon. Will you draw out Leviathan with a hook? Will you make a servant of him forever? Will you play with him as with a bird? God described the creature of the abyss, whose sneezes shot fire, whose heart was as hard as a stone. And he posed the final question to Job. No one is so bold as to rouse him. Who then can stand before me? The argument was devastating. If you can't even face my creation, Job, how dare you face me? At that moment, Job's curse was halted. His anger evaporated. His need for justice, his demand for the why, dissolved. Because finally, he saw. He saw who was behind the accident. He did not see the accuser. The name of Satan was never revealed to him. He saw something much more important. He did not see an unjust God. He did not see a sadistic tyrant. He saw God himself. He saw the creator of Leviathan. He saw the architect of the dawn stars. He saw an intelligence so vast, a sovereignty so absolute, and a power so terrifying and beautiful that the question of his own suffering ceased to make sense. It was like an ant asking a mountain why it cast shade. The question was irrelevant. The young man had cursed a God he believed to be unjust, small, a God who must follow his rules. But that God did not exist. The one in the whirlwind was real. Job covered his mouth, and when the storm calmed, he responded. His voice was no longer of anger, but of awe. Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. God pressed him again, and Job finally surrendered. I know that you can do all things, and that no thought can be hidden from you. And then he uttered the phrase that changed everything. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear. I had heard of God through his friends, through theology, through rules. But now, my eyes see you. He saw who was behind everything. Not a demon, not a system. He saw God, and that vision was enough. Therefore, Job concluded, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. He did not repent of a secret sin he did not commit. He repented of his arrogance. He repented of believing that his small mind could measure the creator of the universe. The story ends with restoration. God turned to Job's friends, and his anger, held back for so long, was unleashed upon them. My anger was kindled against you, he told them, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. In the final irony, Job's honest blasphemy was more righteous in God's eyes than his friend's pious but false theology. They defended an idol. Job wrestled with reality. Job's restoration was complete. God gave him twice as much as he had lost. 7,000 sheep became 14,000. 3,000 camels became 6,000. And he was given 10 more children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. And it is said that in all the land there were no women as beautiful as Job's daughters. The young man who cursed God in his pain lived to see his life restored. But restoration was not the point. The accuser was forgotten, his bet lost, and never mentioned again. The true ending of the story happened in the whirlwind, when the man stopped demanding answers and instead, finally, saw